The Supreme Court's ruling against Trump's sweeping tariff plan sent shockwaves through Washington and Mar-a-Lago. The decision reverberated not just through the halls of power, but across the nation, igniting fierce debate and deepening political divides. For many, it was a moment that underscored the high stakes of presidential authority and the checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. The plan, which aimed to levy tariffs and redistribute the revenue to American families, was declared unconstitutional. The justices argued that such sweeping economic measures exceeded the powers granted to the executive branch, reaffirming the limits of presidential reach. Legal scholars quickly weighed in, calling the decision a landmark moment in the ongoing struggle over separation of powers. Trump's reaction was immediate and furious. He reportedly stormed out of a meeting upon hearing the news, venting his frustration to close aides and confidants. The former president, never one to hide his emotions, made it clear he saw the ruling as a direct attack on his legacy. He took to Truth Social, blasting the decision as a betrayal, even by justices he appointed. In a series of rapid-fire posts, Trump accused the court of turning its back on the American people and caving to political pressure. His posts accused the court of weakness and political bias, claiming they were undermining America's ability to protect its workers. He warned that the decision would have dire consequences for American jobs and manufacturing, painting a picture of economic decline if his plan was not revived. Trump's allies echoed his outrage on news networks, framing the ruling as another example of Washington elites thwarting the will of the people. Conservative commentators rallied to his side, arguing that the court had overstepped and that the voice of ordinary Americans was being silenced once again. Calls for retribution against the justices began circulating among his most ardent supporters. Online forums and rallies buzzed with anger, with some demanding congressional investigations, and others calling for sweeping judicial reforms. The attack on judicial independence was unprecedented, straining the fabric of the court's authority. Security was quietly increased around the Supreme Court as officials braced for potential unrest and further escalation. For Trump, this was more than a policy defeat. It was a personal affront and a blow to his political identity as a dealmaker. The setback threatened to undermine his image as a leader who could bend the system to his will and deliver results for his base. He vowed to fight on, promising his followers he'd find another way to deliver on his promises. At rallies and in interviews, Trump doubled down, insisting that the battle was far from over and that he would not be deterred by what he called a rigged system. The Supreme Court's decision marked not an end, but the beginning of a new, more turbulent chapter in Trump's post-presidency. The ruling set the stage for a fierce political and legal struggle, with both sides preparing for a prolonged fight over the future of executive power. The stage was set for a battle over the very limits of presidential power, a conflict that would test the resilience of American institutions and the nation's commitment to the rule of law. At the heart of the controversy was Trump's tariff dividend, a bold promise to send $2,000 checks to American families, funded by tariffs on imports. The idea was simple on the surface, but it quickly became a lightning rod for debate across the country. Trump pitched it as a win-win. Foreign countries would pay, and American families would benefit. The plan was framed as a way to make other nations foot the bill for America's recovery, while putting real money in the hands of everyday people. The plan was unveiled with typical showmanship, positioned as a direct answer to economic anxiety and inflation. Trump's team touted it as a creative solution to rising costs, promising immediate relief for struggling households. Trump claimed the tariffs would generate enough revenue to fund the dividend and even help reduce the national debt. Supporters argued it was a patriotic way to strengthen the economy and reward American families. The message was simple and powerful. America gets paid, families get relief. For many, it sounded like a straightforward path to prosperity, but economists quickly pointed out a fundamental flaw. Tariffs are paid by U.S. importers, not foreign governments. This critical detail was often lost in the political messaging. Those costs are passed on to consumers through higher prices at the store, the gas pump, and beyond. Everyday Americans would ultimately bear the burden. The dividend was essentially taxing Americans, then giving some of that money back in the form of a check. It was a circular process that raised questions about who really benefited. Far from free money, it risked fueling the very inflation it was meant to fight. Rising prices could easily outpace the relief provided by the checks. The plan's populist appeal masked a complex and costly reality. What sounded like a simple fix was, in practice, a tangled web of economic trade-offs. critics saw it as a convoluted redistribution scheme, not a genuine solution. The debate over the tariff dividend plan revealed just how complicated economic policy can be, especially when the stakes are so high for American families. The legal fight centered on whether Trump could use emergency powers to bypass Congress and impose sweeping tariffs. The administration invoked the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a law never used for such broad tariffs. Lawsuits argued this was an unconstitutional end-run around Congress's authority to regulate commerce and raise revenue. During oral arguments, justices from both sides questioned whether such a major economic move could be justified without explicit congressional approval. The administration's legal position contradicted Trump's public statements, undermining their case. The court's skepticism signaled a reluctance to let presidents unilaterally enact major policies by declaring emergencies. Economists across the spectrum quickly dismantled the plan's math. Analyses showed the proposed tariffs would generate far less revenue than needed for the promised $2,000 checks. The shortfall was massive, hundreds of billions of dollars. Experts explained that tariffs are taxes on consumers, raising prices on everything from electronics to groceries. The Tax Foundation argued that eliminating tariffs would do more to help families than this convoluted rebate scheme. Instead of reducing the deficit, the plan would have ballooned it. The tariff dividend was exposed as a fiscal illusion, not a path to prosperity. The numbers simply didn't add up. The plan faced political obstacles from the start. Even with a Republican House, passing such a costly program was unlikely. Democrats opposed it as reckless, and many Republicans balked at its price tag and impact on free trade. Internal confusion was clear when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent admitted he hadn't been consulted. The White House scrambled to redefine the dividend as existing tax cuts, not direct checks. This contradiction undermined the plan's credibility and exposed a lack of serious policy groundwork. By the time the Supreme Court ruled, the plan was already collapsing under its own contradictions. The Supreme Court's decision was about more than tariffs. It was a landmark on presidential power. The ruling reaffirmed Congress's authority over taxation and major economic policy. Justices warned that allowing such broad use of emergency powers would set a dangerous precedent. The decision strengthened the major questions doctrine, requiring clear congressional approval for sweeping executive actions. Future presidents, regardless of party, will face higher legal barriers when using emergency powers for domestic agendas. The court sent a clear message: transformative policies require legislative approval, not creative legal workarounds. This ruling reshapes the balance of power between the branches of government. The boundaries of executive authority have been redrawn. The Supreme Court's rejection of Trump's tariff dividend plan closes a turbulent chapter in American economic policy, but its lessons will echo for years to come. This decision marks not just the end of a controversial proposal, but a turning point in how the nation approaches trade, executive authority, and the promises made to the American public. First and foremost, the ruling underscores a fundamental truth: tariffs are taxes on consumers, not on foreign governments. This reality, once debated, is now impossible to ignore. Everyday Americans felt the impact at the checkout line, as prices for goods rose and household budgets were stretched thin. The economic burden was not abstract, it was personal, affecting families, small businesses, and communities across the country. The promise of free money from abroad was exposed as a costly illusion. Instead of windfalls, many found themselves grappling with higher costs and uncertainty. The experience has left a lasting impression on both policymakers and the public, serving as a reminder to scrutinize bold claims and look beyond political slogans. Second, the Supreme Court's ruling reasserted the separation of powers, making it clear that presidents must work with Congress on major economic policies. This check on executive authority is a cornerstone of American democracy, ensuring that no single branch can act unilaterally on issues that affect millions. For importers who paid unlawful tariffs, the question of refunds now looms large. Businesses are left navigating a complex legal landscape, uncertain about whether they will recover lost revenue or continue to bear the costs of past decisions. The outcome will have ripple effects throughout the economy, influencing future trade relationships and business planning. For Trump and his allies, attention now shifts to more conventional economic proposals. The focus is likely to move toward policies with broader support and clearer legal footing, as the lessons of this episode inform future strategies and campaign promises. The entire saga stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of policymaking by headline and the persistent gap between political rhetoric and economic reality. It highlights the need for careful analysis, transparency, and accountability in government decisions that touch the lives of millions. The court's decision has sparked a broader conversation about trade, executive power, and the very foundations of American governance. Across the country, lawmakers, business leaders, and citizens are debating the proper balance between bold action and constitutional limits. As the dust settles, the importance of checks and balances is clearer than ever. The ruling serves as a powerful reminder that the American system is designed to prevent overreach and protect the interests of its people. The nation moves forward, but the questions raised by this case will shape debates for years to come. As policymakers and citizens reflect on what's next, the lessons learned here will continue to influence the path forward for American democracy and economic policy.